The text comes from a number she doesn't have saved. I assumed you already knew. I'm so sorry. I thought that's why you two stopped talking. No name, no context. Just those two sentences sitting at the top of her screen, like a note slid under a door she didn't know had been closed. Her name is Nadia, and she has absolutely no idea what she's supposed to already know. She types back one word. Who is this? Simple, calm, the kind of calm that only exists before understanding catches up with you. The reply takes 4 minutes. She counts. It's Priya, from Stella's birthday, 2 summers ago. I saw them together, at the Sunday market in Millfield. They looked comfortable, like it wasn't new. Nadia reads it twice, then a third time. Then she sets her phone face down on the kitchen counter and stands completely still. Them. There is only one them that lives inside a sentence like that. Before we go any further, you need to understand what Callum was. Not all of it, just enough. He was the kind of man who was very good at being your favorite version of himself. Attentive when you were watching, absent when you weren't. He had a particular gift for making you feel like your own perception was the problem. Like your instincts were static, your feelings were symptoms, your memory was soft and unreliable. 2.5 years with him, and Nadia came out the other side, genuinely uncertain of her own mind. She knows that now. She didn't then. What she knew then was the specific exhaustion of a woman who has been gently talked out of her own reality so many times she stopped trying to describe it. The low-grade hum of unease with no name. The way she'd cry on the drive home from perfectly fine dinners and tell herself she was being too much. His phrase, his quiet diagnosis. Too much, too sensitive, too intense. By the time she finally ended it with Callum, she wasn't sure if she'd made the right call or had another episode of her own instability. Episode. His word. She'd started borrowing it. Stella was there for all of it. That is the part that matters most. Stella was the 11 p.m. phone call when Nadia couldn't stop crying and didn't have a reason. She was the one across the sticky table at that wine bar on Clement Street, the one with the good Bordeaux and the bad lighting, saying, "You are not crazy. You are not what he says you are. You are not too much." She said it with conviction, the real kind, the kind you feel in your sternum. She held Nadia's hand across the table. Nadia believed her. Of course she believed her. And then, at some point after that, nobody can tell her exactly when, and that detail is going to matter before this is over, Stella apparently decided the man she just described as quietly devastating was worth getting to know a little better herself. Nadia picks the phone back up. She goes to Stella's Instagram. She's not looking for anything specific. She's doing what you do when someone drops a match in a room you thought was empty. You look around. You check what's been sitting there the whole time. And there it is, 8 weeks ago. Stella at the Sunday market in Millfield, holding sunflowers, squinting into the light, captioned something about golden hour. The kind of post you scroll past without a second thought. Except, in the reflection of the shop window behind her, a man. Same height, same dark jacket Nadia picked out for Callum's birthday the year before she left. Shoulders she would know from 100 feet away. She zooms in. The image blurs. She zooms back out. In again. Like if she does it enough times, the picture rearranges itself into something else. It doesn't. Here's what happens when you've been told you're unstable for long enough. You start to wonder, in moments exactly like this one, if you're doing that thing again. His thing. The one he used to warn people about. She can feel that old voice trying to surface right now. Are you certain? Could you be misreading this? Isn't this precisely what you do? She sets the phone down, but this time, she knows exactly whose voice that is, and she is done letting it sound like her own. Because what she doesn't know yet, what none of us know yet, is that Stella didn't fall for Callum somewhere in the months after Nadia walked away. The timeline goes back much further than that. She and Stella have been friends since they were 23. That's the part that keeps surfacing, quiet and insistent, while Nadia stands in her kitchen trying to locate the floor beneath her feet. Not 2 years, not the length of a situationship or a work friendship that never quite became real. 11 years. The kind of friendship that has its own history, its own private language, its own running list of things only the two of them think are funny. 11 years is long enough to be in each other's weddings. Stella was Nadia's maid of honor at a wedding that didn't happen, the one she called off at 31, when she realized she was marrying someone she'd settled for because settling felt safer than being alone. Stella talked her into making that call, sat with her while she made it. 11 years is long enough that you stop performing for each other. You show up at the door without texting first. You know where the spare key is. You've seen each other ugly cry over things that don't deserve tears, and neither of you has ever mentioned it since. That's what Nadia's mourning right now, before she even knows the full shape of what happened. Not just the betrayal, the archive, the entire interior world of a friendship she thought was mutual. Here's what their dynamic actually looked like, and pay attention to this because it matters. Stella was the stable one. That was the story they'd always told. Nadia was passionate, intense, a lot to carry. Stella was even-keeled, grounded, the one who kept her head. And Nadia had believed that framing so completely that she'd built her understanding of herself around it. She was the friend who needed managing. Stella was the one who did the managing. Generous, patient, endlessly steady Stella. What Nadia is only now beginning to consider, standing in her kitchen with the sunflower photo still open on her phone, is who that story served. Because here's the thing about people who position themselves as the calm one. Sometimes they're calm because they genuinely are. And sometimes they're calm because they already know the ending. She thinks about a Tuesday, maybe 14 months ago. She was in the middle of the worst stretch with Callum, the part where she'd started second-guessing whether she was remembering their arguments correctly, whether her version of events was trustworthy. She called Stella from a parking garage. She remembers the specific acoustics of it, the low concrete echo, the way she was trying not to cry loud enough to be heard. Stella had picked up on the second ring. She'd listened. She'd said all the right things. But there had been a moment, Nadia had almost forgotten it until right now, where there was a pause before Stella answered a question. A beat too long. The kind of silence that, at the time, Nadia had read as Stella choosing her words carefully. The kind of care a good friend takes. She's not reading it the same way anymore. If you've ever had a friendship this old and this close, then you already know what it feels like to realize that the intimacy you thought you were sharing was only flowing one direction. That you were an open book to someone who was reading you from behind a locked door. If you haven't, stay close. Because the worst part of this isn't what Stella did. It's what Nadia is about to find out Stella said. This is exactly the kind of story we sit with together around here. If you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. We're just getting started. Because while Nadia was on the phone with Stella at 11 p.m., working through whether she was losing her mind, Stella was apparently building something on the other side of that conversation that required Nadia to look exactly as unstable as Callum had always suggested she was. And she was not quiet about it. Priya's message wasn't the first crack. It was just the first one Nadia paid attention to. She's thinking now about something her coworker Danny said, offhandedly, at a birthday drinks maybe 6 months ago. something Nadia had brushed off because the context made no sense at the time. I heard you had a pretty rough few years. Sounds like it got pretty dark. Nadia had laughed it off, said everyone has rough patches, assumed it was the natural spread of general gossip about a breakup. But Danny didn't know Callum. She'd never met him. The only way Danny could have known anything specific was if someone who did know Callum told her. And the only person in Nadia's life who knew Callum that well, who'd heard every detail, every low moment, every version of events Nadia had trusted her with, was Stella. She'd been narrating Nadia's breakdown to people who had no business knowing about it. The question is why? And the answer to that, the real answer, the one that reframes every single phone call, every wine bar evening, every hand held across a sticky table, is sitting in a place Nadia hasn't thought to look yet, but she's about to. She doesn't call Stella right away. She wants to... That first wave of adrenaline almost takes her straight to the contact and presses dial, but something stops her. Some older, quieter instinct that has been keeping her alive through situations like this for years. She needs to know more before she says a word. Not because she doubts what she's seen, because she has been in enough rooms where the facts were twisted fast enough that she left wondering what was real. She is not walking into this conversation with only a blurry reflection in a shop window. She wants the full picture before Stella gets the chance to paint over it. So she calls Priya back instead. Priya answers like she's been waiting, which she probably has. And within 3 minutes of talking, Nadia understands that Priya has been sitting on this for a while. The particular discomfort of someone who knows something they weren't sure was their place to say. She'd seen Stella and Callum at the market on a Sunday morning, not passing through, settled. Coffee in hand, easy conversation, the comfortable body language of two people who don't need to perform for each other anymore. Priya says, "The reason I texted is because she introduced him to the woman running the flower stall. She said, 'This is my partner.' Just like that, my partner." Nadia doesn't say anything for a moment. Partner is not a word you use for something new. She asks Priya one question, just one. "When do you think it started?" And Priya goes quiet in a way that is itself an answer. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't know, the quiet of someone deciding how much to say. "Nadia, I saw them once before, about 2 years ago, at that wine bar on Clement Street. The one with the sticky menus, the one with the good Bordeaux." Nadia's hand tightens on the phone so slowly she doesn't notice she's doing it. 2 years ago, she was still with Callum. She hadn't left yet. She was still in the middle of losing her mind, trying to figure out if she was the problem. Calling Stella at 11 p.m., walking Stella through every argument, every cold silence, every moment where Callum looked at her like she was something he'd already decided about. And Stella was meeting him for drinks. This is the part of the story where something rearranges. Not loudly. It doesn't arrive like a revelation. It arrives like a temperature drop. The room doesn't change, but something shifts beneath it, and you feel it before you can name it. Because Nadia is thinking now about something she had never thought to question. She is thinking about how Callum always seemed to know. Not the obvious things, the things she told him directly. The other things, the soft underbelly things. The specific fears she'd only described to one person, in detail, in the particular language she used at 11 p.m. when her guard was completely down. He knew she was terrified of becoming her mother. He knew the exact shape of her abandonment fear, the specific way it presented. He knew how to frame his cruelty so it landed precisely on the bruise she'd just finished describing, to Stella, the week before. She had always assumed he was just perceptive. He wasn't perceptive. He had a source. Think about what that means for a moment. Really sit in it. Because it means that every phone call Nadia made to Stella during those 2.5 years, every late night, every whispered fear, every moment she cracked open and showed the raw thing underneath, was potentially being carried back, packaged, delivered. She was being used as her own undoing. And the person holding the information was the same person telling her she wasn't crazy. She wants to know something, and I think you do too. At what point does a woman who is watching her friend dissolve, who is holding the hand of someone coming apart, decide to keep the door open with the man doing the dissolving? What is the calculation there? What does Stella tell herself at 11 p.m. when Nadia hangs up and Callum's name is already lighting up the screen? Drop it in the comments. I want to know what you think she told herself. Because I have a theory, and it is not generous. Nadia finally calls Stella at 2:15 in the afternoon. She's been sitting at the kitchen table for 40 minutes. The sunflower photo is still open on her phone. Stella picks up on the third ring. "Hey you, I was literally just thinking about you." Her voice is warm, easy, completely ordinary. The voice of a woman who either doesn't know what's coming or has been ready for it for a very long time. Nadia says, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to not do the thing where you make me feel like I'm imagining it." A pause. Not long, just enough. And in that pause, Nadia hears everything she needed to hear. Because Stella doesn't say, "What thing?" She doesn't say, "What are you talking about?" She doesn't perform confusion the way an innocent person would. She says, "Okay." Just that. "Okay." And that single word tells Nadia that Stella has been waiting for this call. The question now is how much of the truth she's actually prepared to give. The conversation starts the way these conversations always start, carefully. Stella asks what's going on. Her voice is measured, warm, exactly the register Nadia has heard 1,000 times before. The one that says, "I am a reasonable person, and I am here for you." And Nadia, who has spent 11 years trusting that voice, feels the pull of it even now. The deeply conditioned reflex to soften, to leave a door open, to protect the friendship before the friendship has earned protection. She doesn't. "Were you seeing Callum while I was still with him?" She asks it clean. No build-up, no softening, no "sorry if this is weird." Just the question, placed directly in the space between them. The silence that follows lasts long enough that Nadia counts 3 of her own heartbeats. "It wasn't like that." 4 words. No denial. Not, "Of course not," or "What are you talking about?" or even "Who told you that?" Just, "It wasn't like that." Which is the specific answer of someone who has already accepted that the thing happened and has moved on to controlling how it's framed. Nadia says, "What was it like then?" And Stella starts talking. She talks the way people talk when they've rehearsed for a conversation and the opening didn't go the way they planned. Slightly too fast, circling, filling space. She says it was complicated. She says that Nadia was in such a dark place toward the end that it was hard to know how to help. She says that she and Callum had started talking because she was worried, because she wanted to understand what was happening from his perspective, because sometimes you need to hear both sides. Both sides. Nadia lets that land. Because what Stella is describing, reaching out to the man who was quietly dismantling her best friend to hear his perspective, is being presented as an act of concern, as due diligence, as the behavior of someone who cared so much she needed more information. Nadia asks her when it stopped being about gathering information. Another pause. "I didn't plan for it to become what it became." And there it is. Not an apology, not even close to accountability. Just the passive architecture of a woman describing something that became, as if she were a bystander to her own choices, as if feelings happened to her and she simply had to accommodate them. Nadia has heard this construction before. She is trying to remember where. She keeps Stella talking. Stella says she knows how it looks. She says she hated keeping it from Nadia. She says she wanted to tell her so many times, but the moment was never right. And then more time passed, and it felt impossible. and she genuinely believed Nadia had moved on. She uses the word genuinely twice in 3 sentences, and then she says something that stops the whole conversation cold. "He told me you'd react like this. He said you always made everything about betrayal." Nadia goes very still, because she has heard that sentence before. Not from Stella, from Callum. Verbatim almost. "You make everything about betrayal. You catastrophize. You can't let anything just be what it is." It was one of his most used tools, the one he reached for whenever she got close to naming something real. And now it is living in Stella's mouth, coming out in Stella's voice, as if Stella believes it, as if she has absorbed it so completely that she's offering it back to Nadia as reasonable perspective. He is in this conversation, and he isn't even on the phone. This is the part I want you to hold on to. Not the affair, as ugly as that is. Not even the years of it, the overlap, the timing. This moment, right here. A woman repeating to her best friend the exact language the best friend's abuser used to make her doubt herself, and presenting it as insight. Stella has not just taken up with Callum. She has taken on his entire framework for who Nadia is. She has been looking at Nadia through his lens for so long that she can no longer tell the difference between his perception and her own. And Nadia understands, suddenly and completely, why people thought she was unstable. It wasn't just that Stella was talking about her. It was what she was saying. She wasn't spreading vague gossip about a difficult breakup. She was spreading his version of events, the clinical, sympathetic, well-constructed story of a man dealing with a woman who was, unfortunately, not quite well. She was the credible source, the concerned best friend, the one with no obvious stake. She made it believable. Nadia asks her one more question. She keeps her voice so level it surprises even herself. "Did you tell people I was unstable?" The pause this time is different, shorter. Something has shifted in Stella, some calculation being made in real time. "I expressed concern. That's not the same thing." Nadia says, "To who?" And Stella says a name that makes Nadia's stomach drop straight through the floor. Not a casual acquaintance, not a coworker. Someone whose opinion of Nadia has mattered enormously for the past 18 months. Someone Nadia has been trying very carefully to show a particular version of herself to. Put together, recovered, clear-eyed. Someone who now believes something else entirely. The thing about a woman who has spent 2 years running a quiet campaign against your credibility is that she didn't need to do it loudly. She just needed to do it consistently, in the right rooms, to the right people, with just enough warmth and sadness in her voice to make it sound like concern. Nadia has been losing a war she didn't know she was in. But she knows now. And the name Stella just said changes everything about what happens next. The name is Luca. Nadia says it back out loud, just to make sure she heard correctly. Just to give herself one more second before she has to absorb what it means. Luca. And Stella says, "I ran into him a few months ago. We got to talking. I didn't plan it. I just wanted him to understand what you'd been through, so he could be patient with you." Patient with her. Luca, who Nadia has been carefully, hopefully allowing herself to trust for the past 4 months. Luca, who she'd been so deliberate with, so measured, because she knew what it cost her to get it wrong again, and she wasn't willing to pay that price twice. Luca, who had been pulling back lately in a way she'd been trying not to read too much into. She told herself it was timing, told herself she was catastrophizing. She was not catastrophizing. She thinks about the last time she saw him, 2 weeks ago, a Sunday, coffee that ran long in the good way. The way where neither person wants to be the one to say they should probably go. He'd been warm, present. And then, 3 days later, his texts started arriving slightly later, slightly shorter. The particular cooling that has no single moment you can point to, but that you feel the way you feel a change in weather before it arrives. She had spent 2 weeks turning herself inside out, trying to figure out what she'd done. She didn't do anything. Stella got there first. What exactly did you tell him? Her voice is so quiet it barely sounds like her own. Stella seems to take the quiet as permission to be honest, which is the first miscalculation she's made in 11 years. She told him Nadia struggles with trust, that her last relationship ended badly, partly because of patterns Nadia herself hadn't dealt with, that she tends to pull people close fast and then get overwhelmed, that she meant well, but she could be a lot to handle, and anyone getting involved with her should go in with clear eyes. She delivered this to a man Nadia had been seeing for 4 months. A man who had no context, no history with Nadia, no framework for understanding that the person describing her was sleeping with her ex-boyfriend. A man who heard a concerned friend expressing careful, caring worry, and had no reason to hear it as anything else. She handed Luca a set of glasses, and he put them on. And every time he's looked at Nadia since, he's been looking through Stella's prescription. I was trying to help, Stella says. I didn't want him to get hurt. And something in Nadia goes very, very still. Because she has heard this before too. This exact sentence, this exact framing. I was trying to protect someone from you. Callum used it about her friends, about his family, about anyone he wanted to quietly turn against her. I just didn't want them to worry. I didn't want them to see you like that. The sentence that sounds like care, but functions like a wall, keeps people out, keeps the subject contained. Stella learned from an expert. Nadia asks her, "Did Callum ask you to talk to him?" The silence this time is the longest yet. Not the silence of someone formulating a lie. The silence of someone who has just understood that the conversation they thought they were navigating has moved to terrain they didn't prepare for. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that again. The same 4 words from the beginning of the call. The phrase that has no definition, that concedes the shape of something while refusing to name it.
Stella, did Callum ask you to talk to Luca?
He was just concerned. He still cares about you, Nadia. He doesn't want to see you.
He doesn't want to see me what?
A beat. He doesn't want to see you get hurt again.
Nadia almost laughs. She feels it rise in her chest. Not amusement, but the particular incredulity that arrives when something is so audacious, it briefly short-circuits your ability to respond. The man who spent 2.5 years methodically peeling her away from her own reality now has a vested interest in her not getting hurt. And the woman who held her hand through every one of those years is the one delivering that message, in that warm, careful voice, like it's something Nadia should feel grateful to receive. They have been managing her together. That is the sentence she has been circling since Priya's text arrived this morning. She arrives at it now and stays there. Not a betrayal that happened once, a management strategy, sustained, coordinated, with her as the subject and neither of them as her friend. She thinks about every conversation she'd had with Stella over the past 2 years, every detail she'd offered up freely, the way you do with someone you trust completely. She hadn't been confiding, she had been briefing. And Stella had been taking notes to a meeting Nadia didn't know was happening. The question she can't stop sitting with now is whether any of it, the hand-holding, the wine bar, the 11 p.m. calls, was ever real. Or whether she has been, from some point she can't identify, entirely alone. She doesn't ask Stella that, not yet. Because she's just realized there's one more thing she needs to know before this conversation ends. One detail that will tell her everything about how deliberate this was, how long it ran, and whether what she does next needs to be small or needs to be seismic. And she already knows, somewhere beneath her ribs, that she is not going to like the answer. The question is simple. How did you meet him, Stella? Originally, before me. She hears Stella breathe in, just once, controlled. The breath of someone who has arrived at the moment they've been postponing for 2 years. We knew each other from before. How long before? The pause is the answer. But Nadia waits for the words anyway, because she has earned the words. About a year. A year before Nadia met Callum. A year before Stella introduced them at that rooftop party on a Thursday evening in July, when the sky was doing something ridiculous and Stella had pulled her over and said, "You have to meet this person. I think you'll love him." A year before Nadia shook his hand and thought, within 20 minutes, that she understood why people believed in timing. Stella knew him. She had known him. And she placed him, deliberately, specifically, with Nadia's name and Nadia's particular shape of loneliness already in mind. Nadia doesn't say anything for a long time. She's not spiraling. She's not catastrophizing. She is simply sitting with the full geometry of what she's been living inside, now that she can finally see its edges. Because this changes the texture of every single thing. Not just the betrayal, the architecture of it. Stella didn't fall for her best friend's boyfriend. Stella brought her best friend to her boyfriend. And then she stood at the center of it for 2.5 years, managing both sides, feeding information in both directions, positioning herself as the most trustworthy person in the room while holding all the keys. She wasn't a bystander who got too close. She was the original point of it. And Nadia, who had always believed she was the one who needed managing, had been managed from the very beginning. She says one thing before she ends the call. Not an accusation, not a list of everything she now understands, not the explosion Stella is probably braced for. She says, "I want you to know that I'm not confused about what happened. I'm not going to need time to process whether I'm overreacting. I understand exactly what this was, and I want you to carry that." She hangs up. She sits at the kitchen table for a while after that, not crying, not numb. Something quieter than both. The specific stillness of a woman who has just had the ground beneath her shift and found, to her own surprise, that she is still standing. Because here's what 2.5 years with Callum and 11 years with Stella did not manage to take from her. They could not take her instincts. Every time she felt something was wrong, she was right. Every time she thought she was seeing something clearly, she was. She bent under the weight of being told otherwise, but she did not break and she did not stop seeing. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. She picks up her phone, she texts Luca. Not a long message, not an explanation or a defense or a careful construction designed to undo whatever Stella planted. Just, "There's something I'd like to tell you, if you're open to hearing it. No pressure either way." She doesn't know what he'll say. She can't control that. What she can control is whether she hands someone the truth and lets it stand on its own, instead of shrinking herself into whatever shape someone else's story made for her. He replies within 8 minutes. "I'm open." That is where we leave her. Not in triumph, not in ruins, in the middle of choosing herself with both eyes open, which is the hardest version of that choice and the only one worth making. She didn't come out of this unscathed. She came out of it clear. And for a woman who spent 2.5 years being told her own perception was the problem, Clarity is not a small thing. Clarity is the whole thing. If you're watching this and you've been in a room where the people who were supposed to be safe were quietly making you smaller, I need you to hear this. Your instincts were not noise. They were signal. You were never the problem. You were just surrounded by people who needed you to believe you were. There is a difference. It matters enormously. The next story I'm bringing you, I want you to stay close for this one because it starts where most people would have stayed quiet, and she didn't. Take that as your preview. You are not too much. They were just not enough. Around here, we don't just survive it. We understand it. And then we let it go. She didn't win by fighting louder. She won by knowing more. Remember that. The firelight is always on. I'll see you next time.